Hey kids! Mr. King here, again to teach you a little bit of some drawing tips for texture actually. And I wanted to do something kind of fun. I just taught you guys a little bit about doing scales, but this time I want to do this kind of cool ribbing that we got here. I got a picture pulled in of an earthworm here, and I thought that'd be a cool thing to use because it's going to be relatively easy, because if we make mistakes we don't need to worry about it because it's a worm and it bends any which way. And in the same way that it's not really super complex, but we'll add a little bit of fun to it. But there is some really cool texture. You can see all these little ribs in here that are along the body. And if you've ever actually held an earthworm, they don't feel smooth and slick like they might be. They've got this really interesting texture to them because all those little ribs have little kind of like little hook hairs that grab on, and that's how it kind of inches its way through the ground. Really cool thing. So what I am going to do is I'm going to start with some drawing here. I'm going to go with a sketching pencil in this program called Procreate. You guys, I encourage you to grab that #2 pencil and follow along. So what we are going to do is we're not going to copy this guy directly. We're going to do our own thing, but we're going to use him as a reference image. So the first thing I want you guys to do is to make your squiggly line that will be your worm. Now if your line does not look like mine, that's really not a big deal, okay? Because any of these is going to be correct. The next piece that you're going to do is just like we see in the bottom of our worm here. The tail ends to almost a point. The other side of the worm up at the top there is actually the head where the mouth is. So it's got a little bit more of a curve to it where it kind of caves into where the mouth is. It's really kind of cool because you can't see the mouth to a worm when you look at it with your eye normally. But it is there. It's pretty cool. It's like a big tube stomach animal. It's a pretty neat thing. So anyways, we are going to create the end of the tail by kind of just doing a little light curve on the bottom, if you notice that. And then we're going to create a pretty well parallel line here. Now, I want to avoid getting hung up on any details right now because I'm just trying to get the shape of my worm done. And what I actually want to do is I want to make sure I leave the end of this kind of open and flared out a little bit, meaning a little wider, and we'll come back to that in just a minute, all right? If you want to, you can actually, I'm going to extend my worm. I'm going to make mine like a super long earthworm. Whoops. And I am going to make mine a little wider at the top than you'd expect. Sorry, I keep backing up one step because I'm making my marks a little bit off. But yeah, so I'm going to make mine a little wider at the top. I'll show you why just a little bit. That is where I'm going to put the head of my awesome worm right there. And then the next part, you guys saw that collar. I'm going to switch to a red so you guys can see my highlighting here. That collar up here. Going around the worm. We're not going to worry about that until we get a little further along, but I wanted to let you know that I did see that, and we will work with that. So, the texture of the worm, what we're going to do is up here, near the head of the worm, we are actually going to, between these two lines, put a dot, okay? And that dot is going to represent, make it a little lighter than that, the very tip, the very end of the worm's head right there, where its mouth would be. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a circle going around that. I'm going to circle going around that, and watch this. Instead of it being a perfect target like that, we're actually going to make our next circle squeeze on the side that would be like near the end of the worm. And then the next circle even more so. And this time the circle is actually going to go out and reach those lines on the outside. And what we're going to do, or what we have done, is we have made the end of our worm that way. And all you need to do is create parallel curved lines going down the length of your worm. Now, if you haven't already noticed, I've had to erase a whole bunch of times while I've been doing this, and that is totally okay. That's normal. That's what you should be doing. I will highly encourage you guys to draw really, really lightly when you first draw your pictures, and then erase as you see fit, as you need to. Sorry, I was just checking to make sure my video is still recording okay. And I'm going to go all the way down the length of the worm, except for that. This is where we're going to deal with that collar near the bottom. So you guys kind of see how it looks like the worm up here at the end is pointing at me. And that was kind of the point of putting that dot near the end. We'll probably actually erase that dot in the center when we're all the way done. So again, have your erasers handy. And remember to draw big. We might be drawing a very small little animal here with a worm, but we still want to draw it really large. So I'm going to put the collar right down over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a curved edge rectangle, curved corner rectangle I should say, going around the worm's body right there. I'm going to come back into my eraser. I'm going to erase those lines on the inside. Remember, don't worry about being a little bit sloppy. That is totally okay. You can always go back over stuff. The wonderful thing about pencils and erasers is that you get to erase, you get to work on that. So now I'm going to create my collar with that awesome worm texture. Okay, I made it a little bit more, like the ribbing a little closer together on the collar. You can leave it at the same width as the rest of the ribbing. I just decided to do that for a little change of pace, not really to be realistic to what the worm would look like. But we're making this texture by creating curved lines on our worm. And the reason being, our worm isn't actually a flat thing. A worm is not a piece of paper. A worm is actually a elongated cylinder. It gets stretched out and pulled out. So by making this cylinder here, this is representing like a chunk of my worm, I have to curve the lines on the cylinder to make it appear as a curved form if there were ribs going across it. If I did straight lines there, whoops, you would see it looks really weird. It looks like wrong. Like, what am I doing there? Looks like some sort of railroad track. You know what I mean? So remember to make your lines on your worm here curved. And so that creates that texture, and that texture reinforces the idea that this worm is three-dimensional. It tells people, oh look at that little texture right there. It curves along the body of the worm. You notice I just erased that little dot in the middle. And so you can start to see now I've got my worm facing towards me. Now you could definitely add light and shadow to this. If you look really, really close, there's actually, like, it's almost like it looks like the trunk of like a palm tree. So if you want to create a little bit of that going on, you could go all the way back into every single one of these. You could erase your outside line. Make this a little bigger so it's easier to do. You could get rid of that outside line. And on every single one of these lines that you've drawn before, you could actually create those little bumps in. And this would actually make it look really amazing. And you can see how much better that side of my worm looks now. But one thing I'm going to warn you about that is it's just going to be time consuming. So I'll probably do that at the end of the video here so you can see how good you could really make this look. But I'm not going to get hung up on it right here. That's really it, guys. It's pretty darn simple to do, and I think it's really, really cool to make that really realistic earthworm. One fun thing I want to point out is that it is really easy to turn this guy into a character, and I could show you how real quick, and I'll actually create a new layer so I don't kind of mess up the realistic drawing that I have right here. But you'd make another, or instead of doing another layer, you're just going to erase what you have. I'm going to go back to my worm, I'm going to erase a little section here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to erase a little spot. He's going to have like a long head that droops down over the top because he is a worm. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add that mouth. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to have the kind of like this big smile going on here. And this looks like a weird shape, I know. And I don't really know how to describe this other than maybe what looks like a upside down flag, like the flag is pointing that way. And once you do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my eraser again, because that is so helpful to have, and that's why pencil is so nice. And you know what? I like the idea of him not having eyes, because worms don't have eyes, but they do have a mouth. So, like, why not make the cartoon mouth on the side of his body? Whoops, I just undid the erasing I was supposed to do. It would just be kind of a funny thing to me. It would be like, oh, it's realistic, but it's obviously not. So I'm going to add this little extra wedge right here, and these are going to be his teeth, actually. So I'm just going to do, like, because worms don't really have teeth, but we're making them into a cartoon character that does. And you guys can see a little of that, and this little curved piece down here, that's actually going to be his tongue. I like how it lines up with his body, because that just somehow makes it like more anatomically correct, even though it's totally made up and cartoony. And so you can see he's like, hey, what up? So he's like, what's going on? You know, so that's just, I think, a funny thing, like, yo, Mr. Worm. You know, he's just a little funny little character right here. And he just wants to talk to you. You know what? He's not Mr. Worm. He went to school. And this is actually funny because I remember there's a song called this. He's Dr. Worm. Okay? Yo, I'm Dr. Worm. So, Dr. Worm's going to help you out. But I just think that's a fun thing. So what I'll do is at the very end of the video here, I'm just going to keep adding that texture to make my worm look even more realistic. And if I have time in the video, maybe I'll add a little shading, maybe not. But I think it's a fun little one. Give it a shot. Make your earthworm. Give him that texture. Check it out. This works really good, too, if you want to make like the rattlesnake tail. It's the same exact process. You can do that ribbing on the end of the tail. But one thing I'd like to point out is if you actually separate it into two pieces, that is more accurate to what is on a rattlesnake. So like the rattlesnake tail is more of, oh man, my drawing's kind of funky right now. I will tell you why too. My screen that I'm drawing on is sticky because my son used his hand covered in maple syrup to grab the screen. So you can see that's like what the rattlesnake tail would end up looking like. It's very poorly drawn, but you're going to have to forgive me with my maple syrup covered screen here. So, at the very end, I'm going to throw the music back on. You guys can listen to some music, chill out, watch me draw the very end of this, and hopefully you make some of your own in a little bit. And I will catch you next time where we'll draw just a little bit more texture before we jump into a little bit of new stuff before the end of the year here. All right, have an awesome day. I'll catch you guys later. If you want to talk to me, leave a comment, and I will try to reply. Bye-bye.
They call me Dr. Worm. Good morning, how are you? I'm Dr. Worm. I'm interested in things. I'm not a real doctor, but I am a real worm. I am an actual worm. I live like a worm. I like to play the drums. I think I'm getting good, but I can handle criticism. I'll show you what I know, and you can tell me if you think I'm getting better on the drums. I'll leave the front unlocked 'cause I can hear the doorbell. When I get into it, I can't tell if you are watching me twirling the stick. When I give the signal, my friend Rabbi will play the solo. Someday somebody else besides me will call me by my stage name. They will call me Dr. Worm. Good morning, how are you? I'm Dr. Worm. I'm interested in things. I'm not a real doctor, but I am a real worm. I am an actual